Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of City on a Hill. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, there's the whole situation with Grace at the beginning. I thought it was kind of interesting, her straight up lying like that. Just because of a conversation she has with Kelvin at the end of the episode, I thought it was interesting because for me, it's a thing of she lies straight up, but it's like, she's trying to make it seem like she knows that, like, the cops are going to, like, frame him, even though she knows, like, after last episode, he does what he does, that he is the terrible person he is. But I guess it's like she doesn't want to think, like, oh, there's no way my son would actually do that, considering all that Siobhan has done for him. There's no way he would actually do that. But it's also like when Jackie kind of throws it in her face, being like, oh, have you gone to visit Siobhan? You've known Siobhan since she was a little kid, right? So, like, there's the guilt, because there's a part of her that's like, she strongly believes it is possible he did it, but she doesn't want to believe it. But the thing is, do you not want to believe it because you think it's impossible Anton would do it, or is it because there's a part of you that does believe he did it and you just can't bring yourself to, believe that? I don't know. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting element to it. And obviously this kind of ties into the Corsi side of things, where the Corsi is kind of on a, like, path, war path, because, well, for one, he finally ends up telling Siobhan the truth. Like, yeah, the person that shot you was Anton. It's like, yeah, the same Anton that you're defending, that, he's going for you, but he ended up hitting... He was going for me, but he ended up hitting you instead. I think what also kind of plays a role, and I think I brought this out last episode, is kind of like the comparison to, like, the reason why DeCourcy didn't say anything is the same reason why Jackie didn't say anything to Jenny or Benny about Clay. That it's just like the guilt of, like, you admitting it just hits too hard. Of like, right, I'm kind of the one to blame, because DeCourcy's like, I'm the one that kind of pushed him. Because even later on, he has this conversation with Jackie where he was like, basically saying that, like, he's like a piece of a wheel that basically runs over kids and turns them into Anton, saying that because it's like, what am I doing with myself? And basically, like, I'm created the monster that Anton is because of me kind of pushing as hard as I did. It steered the fear in him, and that fear is what led to him, wanting me dead and wanting to shoot, and ended up shooting Siobhan, so... Because obviously for DeCourcy, it's like he tries to go to Dan, he tries to go to Chris about getting involved in this. And Dan, mainly out of self-preservation, is like, you're not going to be a part of this because I don't want you to screw this up. But there is, yes, it's his own self-interest, but there is some truth in what he's saying regardless. Because for him, it's like, you will self-destruct. You're a pain in my ass, but at the very least, I'm trying to save you from self-destructing because you're going down this war path. Because even Chris was like, hey, D, let me handle this. Like, well, yeah, trust you and everything, but, oh, do you know what Anton is? It's like, no. And for him, it's like, our entire relationship is like a boomerang. Like, I throw it your way, but you guys never throw it back. Like, it never bounces back to me, essentially. It's always like a one-way street of, like, I do all this for you guys, but when the time comes and I need you to do something for me, let me handle this, you don't want to. So, like I said, understand the frustration and stuff like that. Dan did cross the line when he was like, oh, like, basically, I'm gonna be the laughing stock, and then if you screw this up, the fact is you're gonna go back to like shining shoes, which DeCourcy's like looking at him like, what the hell did you say? Chris is looking at him like, Dan, why the hell did you say that? That's super racist and super effed up. And DeCourcy's like, first and foremost, I ain't never shined nobody's shoe. 2, I won't lose. It's like, yeah, you won't lose because you're not going to be a part of this case. So you can understand DeCourcy's frustration in that. But, like, the conversation he has later on with Jackie, I thought was kind of interesting about that. Obviously, Jackie also has that conversation about, like, why that basically because even there, like, DeCourcy's, like, lamenting and he's talking about all of Grace's accomplishments and stuff like that. It's like, whoa, like, why are you accomplishing this woman? Why are you bringing up her accolades and stuff like that? It's like, despite everything she's done, she fights for the right causes. She's trying to help out people and stuff like that. But essentially, Jackie was making this comparison of, like, if it weren't for, like, her, like, kind of rough upbringing and stuff like that, I'm butchering it because, like, there's actually more to it. It was actually really kind of interesting because there was a part of the conversation where DeCourcy was like, it's kind of fucked up that you kind of paint the narrative this particular way. it was about Grace. He was making some comparison to something else. I don't remember it off the top of my head now, but it was interesting what he was trying to, like, the approach he was kind of trying to take with it. Another interesting thing that came up during that conversation was DeCourcy bringing up the fact is of, like, you know, because he blamed himself for what happened to Siobhan. It's like, well, since he's got, you know, Jackie there, he's like, if you could, would you go back and change your entire career, pick something else, just if it meant that you could basically erase what ended up happening to your daughter? And for, you know, Jackie, it's like, well, neither one of us can go back, so there's no, like, you know, wishful thinking about that. But he's like, no, I'm asking you earnestly. And then Jackie says, well, it's different. We're talking about Siobhan, your wife, versus my daughter. It's just different. He's like, well, not really, because, you know, Siobhan is pregnant. He's like, hey, well, congratulations. Now you're forever going to have an open wound in your chest. And, cause, you know, for one, it's just like, because, like, your concern for your child will never go away. It's like, that's always going to be that vulnerability of just, like, you're always going to be worried and concerned. Because we even see that element later on when, like, Benny's going out to, like, and it's like, you know, Jackie's like, oh, who's this guy? It was like she said a name and he was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a name that's trustworthy. And, like, it's like, oh, don't, like, you know, Jackie was telling Jenny, he's like, oh, you look like you're about to go out there and say you want to see this guy first. And she's like, really? You look like you're about to, like, you know, blow a gasket yourself. And it's like, the thing is, it's like, because Benny, like, ends up, like, sending in an application for college, and Jenny's a lot more supportive of it, just because for Jackie, it's like, we couldn't even protect her when she was under our own damn roof. Like, how are we going to protect her when she's, like, you know, so far away from us? But Jenny's like, believe in her. The fact is that, you know, she's strong. And it's like, you know, Jackie's like, yeah, she gets it from me. And it's like, yeah, you know, the fact is, like, if she's anything like you, like, what else could she get up to? And Jackie was almost like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? You know? But, which there's also interesting, like, really quickly, too, Benny saying, like, just because it's like, right, we haven't talked about what happened with Dad last episode, like, when he revealed, like, the situation between him and his mom. Dad should see a therapist. It's like, I'm going to AA, you're going to Al-Anon. It's like, we're all kind of dealing with our issue. Dad should deal with his, but Jenny's like, your dad's your dad. You know he's not going to be like, Jackie Rohr's not going to sit down with a therapist. And, you know, Benny's, you know, but for Benny, it's like a thing of she thinks it will help. But Jenny's like, you know, you just focus on you and don't worry about your dad. Don't worry about us, just kind of worry about you. But I'm wondering, is that going to become an element of, like, will Jackie at the end of this, like, at some point during this season, whether it's the very end of the season, whether it's later in this season, what if he ultimately does end up going to see a therapist? I start kind of thinking it might be kind of like a little bit of a Ray Donovan thing where, like, Ray has his issues, much like Jackie's got his upbringing that kind of morphed him into the dude that he is, very much so in the case of, like, Ray and Ray Donovan. And it's like, he had steps that, like, oh, Ray would take a step forward and then kind of take 2 steps back, just because, like, a lot of his past ends up kind of molding him, and he kind of has habits that are hard to break. I'm wondering if Jackie's going to be kind of in a similar vein of, like, yeah, therapy's good for a little bit, but then eventually he starts backpedaling, because like that always ends up being the case where it's like, hey, Jackie's not that bad of a, oh, he did something that makes you kind of think, like, oh, he's backpedaling a little bit. Hell, I didn't even talk about it, but it's like, let's not forget, he pulled a gun on Grace's face at the end of last episode. They talk about it a little bit at the beginning of this episode, but it's like, not too much came about that. It's just like, well, I guess it's just like getting her in there was kind of a byproduct of it, but it's also like, I mean, they have a conversation about it, because I guess it's like, well, you're a white man and an FBI agent. Yeah, despite my good standing in the community and stuff like that, her reputation is kind of falling a little too. So, but it's also like her give a false alibi for Anton. So I guess it all kind of works out in that regard. So that was kind of interesting. It was actually interesting too that Jackie ended up learning about where to like kind of go after Grace, because he was going to speak to Eloise, Siobhan's mom, to dig some dirt up on Grace. But because for him, it's like, it doesn't make any sense that there's literally not a single person that has anything bad to say about the woman. It's like, people who are jealous of her should be making up stuff to at least like start some shit. But it's like, I don't even see that. And he references like there being a mobster. Like, yeah, everyone loved that dude because if you didn't, he'd have someone kill you or you'd be killed. So, so that's why he was trying to compare. Like, yeah, it's kind of a little shady that you can't find any dirt on her, which Eloise was kind of like, yeah, don't look into the past. But that was kind of like a giant metaphor to be like, yo, I meant literally don't look in the past. You should be looking at the present because how'd she come up with that much money? Because there's no way Grace has the $2,500 needed to get Anton on bail, and so that points Jackie in the right direction. So he ends up talking with Ward about it later on, and the question then becomes like, it's like, oh, did she, how would she come up with the money? Did she get it from this? Did that? First wondering if she used Anton's drug money, but it's like, yeah, Grace being who she is, there's no way she'd do it. But it's like, well, Jackie's like, if I was in her position, what would I do? I'd steal it. And it's like, right, the Braxton Summit. It's like, there's no way she wouldn't do that. It's like, she's a desperate woman. The fact of the matter is she thinks her child's going to go away, like, for a long time. The fact is she just needed to do whatever she could to help him until, like, she could potentially replace the money before Anton's trial. And this is actually where, like, that whole Jack Kirby thing came up about, like, where Jack Kirby got the inspiration from the Incredible Hulk. It was basically, like, a mother, like, adrenaline kicking in, lifting up something heavy off her child. I thought that was kind of fascinating because I was like, because Jackie always does that, like he did with the Bram Stoker thing recently about Dracula. I was like, oh, like he keeps pulling out these like metaphors and like philosophical stuff and quotes and stuff like that. Hell, because he even threw one at Siobhan's mom in the episode. She's like, oh, so you read up on Baldwin before you came here just because you know who I am and stuff like that. It's like, so like he always has like some like random like metaphor or like information that's pertinent in the sense of it's trying to be an allegory or a metaphor for the point he's trying to get across. He always has something like stashed away, ready to pull out at any point in time. But like that's why I was like, I feel like there probably is some truth to that Jack Kirby thing, which is kind of interesting. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. But regardless, they also learned the bullet from Anton's gun from when he shot Siobhan doesn't match the bullet from Raina. But it's like, hey, we know that, but his mom doesn't know that, which of course is like a lie to deal with another lie. How very biblical. So later on, Jackie, kind of confronts Grace about it and say, hey, need to look at those files, like the money for like the Braxton Summit and everything. But it's like, well, these only go back a month. It's like, well, we do these quarterly. So she's covered enough where it's like he can't immediately find out where she got the money from. But he is saying like, well, I'll just go to the bank. And he's throwing out there the fact is like, hey, the bullet from, it's like your son not only shot a woman, Siobhan, who's pregnant, he also shot an 11-year-old, which is like, no, my children, Kelvin and Anton, yada, 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 about like, it's like, oh, we were there for like Raina, they cared about her. It's like, we were there for the family and stuff like that. But like, Jackie's still like, lady, you're so far consumed by this BS. It's like, it's like, but you're trying to raise money to do this stuff. You're trying to do good stuff. It's like, oh, me being me, I know I have connections to the U.S. attorney. I could like sweeten the deal. I can like make things kind of work out for you. Or I could basically make it so that you spend like a decade in prison for like the part you played in all of this, like where you got the money and stuff like that. So Grace was able to kind of keep it cool, calm, and collected until the very end there when Jackie ends up leaving the room. It kind of finally hits her and she's just kind of pissed. Jackie's very good at getting underneath people's skin. So there was also that interesting thing between DeCourcy and Siobhan when he ultimately, she's getting out of the hospital, and for her it's like the nurse was literally telling you all you need to do to take care of me and stuff like that and the baby, but it's like you're so focused on something else. But for him it's like, I'm trying to get justice for you, because against Anton. But for her it's like, is it justice or is it just revenge? It's like, me and the baby are okay. We're right here. You should be more focused on that. It's like, hell, that sick bastard is gunning for you. You should be the one that actually sticks home. So for her, it's like, just focus more on the good that you have, that we're still here. You being a father, us being parents, us being husband and wife. Like, focus on the family first and foremost rather than revenge. Because it is interesting, like, monsters beget monsters. Because of the way, like I brought up earlier, of course, he had questioned, like, the way he approached things. Because of the way he did, it led to Anton's fear. And that fear is why Anton wants him dead. But now it's like, DeCourcy wants full-blown revenge against him. So it's like this the cycle of violence, and hatred, like how it kind of perpetuates like that. So it's like, just spend time with your family, spend your time with me is kind of what she was getting at, rather than being so focused on revenge, So I just thought that was kind of an interesting, like, conversation between the two of them in that regard. So there's also the whole Kelvin thing with him and his boys getting rolled on by Junior. We at least know the main, like, bodyguard dude ended up dead. We saw him, like, shot. He got shot in the back, but also, like, shot in the head, dead in the bathroom. Luckily, Kelvin, like, the door got blown open and, like, he was behind the door at the time, so he was hidden away. We know one of the guys got shot, but he kind of managed to get away, so we don't know if it was like we don't know whether or not Junior and them eventually caught up with him, but mainly it was like, hey, let's strike now while the iron's hot, and ended up kind of stealing their drugs or their money or whatever. But obviously when Kelvin runs into Anton later on, which there was that guy that was following him, we never got to find out whether that was just a dude that lived in the building or whether there was something more to it. It was just kind of like Kelvin managed to slip away from him, but it's hard to say. Because I feel because they're just like chilling, while Anton's eating a sandwich later on. So maybe he's like, I got away from the guy, so it doesn't matter. But I'm still just kind of like, that just seemed like, and he didn't bring it up either. So I guess he kind of chalks it up. The guy didn't follow me all the way down here, so I guess I'm just being paranoid. So maybe that's all they kind of chalk it up to. But there is a conversation about, like, once again, he's telling his brother, you need to strike back. We need to make a mark against him. But for Kelvin, it's the thing of, like, the fact is, you should leave. Like, the fact is, you went after Siobhan, which even he's like, yeah, my anger got the best of me. So that's all he kind of chalks it up to. But the fact is, for Kelvin, it's like, if you're not going to leave for me or your own sake, leave for mom's sake. Because if you stick around, you're just going to, like, draw more attention. She's going to get swept up in everything, which Anton replies like, this is my town. It's just as much my town as it is anyone else's. So for him, it's like, it's the thing I've talked about before where it's like, he says like a lot of stuff he does is for his mom, but also it's like, you like what the power you get to feel important. You get to feel like the boss. He ended up having to take the reins of everything. Like once stuff kind of went sideways, when a lot of like the hierarchy got arrested, potentially, as DeCourcy brought up last episode, like you probably like killed your way to the top with anyone that was left that tried to take the head of the operation. So maybe that's still kind of a plausibility of like dealing with those skeletons in this closet from that regard. But he had brought up also last episode like, this is something I'm really good at. So it is a thing of like, it seems like, I'm really good at this. I do love the power and everything. So, yes, maybe there is still some form of altruism with like, he is legitimately doing it for his mom. But it's also a good chunk of it, I feel like, is about himself. It's just about the power and reputation. It's like, this is mine. I ain't going to let nobody take it from me like I'm some punk. It's what it feels like. But it's like, okay, when we deal with this, I'll leave for sure. And it's like, but I don't believe him when he said he was going to leave. I think he was going to find a way to squirm, like either like, I'm going to lay low till this is all done, or at the very least, he probably would disappear. But at least this way, Kelvin and them could kind of amp up operations and stuff like that. I think could be potentially a justification for it, but who knows? But they do later on deal with Junior and his people. I think it's interesting to note Kelvin, all Kelvin did was like throw out the smoke grenade. Yeah, he was, assistant with it, much like kind of like the Reyna thing. I'm sure at the end of the day, like, I'm sure the bullet that killed Reyna most likely came from him, sadly. Because it definitely didn't come from Anton. But to be fair, it's also the thing of, they probably got rid of the guns, so like, of course there's not going to be a connection in that regard. But so there is no telling, like, with all the shots being fired, whose bullet it doesn't alleviate them their involvement in her death, but still. Junior ends up shooting Anton, and Anton ends up having to call their mom, and she says like, you can't be there, don't be there when I'm guessing more so than anything it's like, because at the very least if she lies, she's not, I'm blanking on a phrase right now. a plausible deniability, because it's a thing of, I actually don't know where you, like, I think she was being truthful the entire episode when she was like, yeah, I don't know where Anton is. That's kind of the whole point. So, like, that's why she's like, if I run into Anton, I will be legitimately lying if they ask me later on where you are. It's like, but also I think right now, considering everything going down, she actually doesn't want to see Anton's face. But at the end of it all, we see, like, you know, her driving Kelvin to a hospital, and Kelvin's like, I'm sorry, Mom. She's like, don't say like it's your last words, but for him, it's like, I just want you to know, like, I just wanted to make you proud and everything. And it's like, did Anton shoot Siobhan? And it's like, yeah. Then also kind of connecting it that, yeah, it's like, even Kelvin admitting, like, yeah, probably, you know, he was connected. We were all connected to, like, what happened to Raina too. So it is that thing of, like, at this point in time, she can't turn a blind eye anymore. Which, obviously, that's a conversation where it's like, yeah, I get, like, turning a blind eye at your kid and everything, but it's still the thing of, there's a point where you have to be like, okay, the reality's smacking me in the face, and I have to accept it. So, but at the very end, she, like, runs a red light because she's, like, desperate, you know. Kelvin's circumstances, I'm sure they'll probably draw the bullet from him, and probably, like, the gunfight with Junior. Like, they'll probably, like, correlate, like, the dead bodies of, like, Kelvin and Anton's people with the bullet from Junior. So it'll be like, yep, Junior's gun was what was used not only to shoot Kelvin, but also them. So connecting Kelvin to, like, so Grace will probably have no choice at that point to throw Anton under the bus, not only because of all that she's learned and kind of has no choice but to accept now, but also to, like, protect Kelvin from getting mixed up in all of this, so that he doesn't get dragged down by this. She has to basically she's probably going to end up setting up Anton, like, hey, I'm going to meet with you, baby, and then, like, he shows up, reveals himself, and gets arrested. Potentially, I could see that being a direction of where that goes, but, you know, we'll see. Another angle to this episode is the whole situation with Maeve. Now, I thought it was interesting because obviously we got a little bit more of this episode. Like, obviously there's something between her and Father Doyle, and then it's just like at first she's kind of a little cheeky with Father Doyle about the circumstances and stuff like that, and I was like, just like the way she's talking to him, and then later on it makes me feel like she's kind of like lying. She's definitely got to be lying about something, like, or at the very least, like, you know, because Father Doyle's kind of like, yeah, don't let your circumstances drag anyone else down. Or then later on, after hanging out with Jenny, like, drinking the Guinness and everything, some dude attacks her. Luckily, Jenny interfered. Maeve makes it seem like, I was an ex, don't worry about it. And she confronts, she asks, you know, Father Doyle's like, oh, her, for advice on the circumstance. He gets solemn about it, and it's like, honestly, don't get involved. Her sins, her situation, it's hers alone. It's like, oh, but she's a good person. Yeah, but she's not good for you. Just stay away. And so Maeve ends up opening up to Jenny about the fact that she was part of the IRA. I actually had to look it up. I am not well versed in Ireland's history, but, like, apparently it was like the Ireland Republic Army. It's a thing from, like, I think it said it was, like, from the 29 to, like, 60 something. Once again, I think there's the real IRA, and then there's, like, the new IRA. I don't know if that's something that's still, like, established at that time. Maybe it was, like, remnants of it or whatever. But it was like what was the word? It was kind of like a military group, kind of doing their thing. The little bit I was reading was like, yeah, the IRA, like, were trying to, like, get the British out of Ireland. God, what was the word I'm looking for? It, like I said, it was just kind of like a militia group of sorts. Once again, I'm speaking from ignorance. I completely understand if someone needs to kind of check me and, like, correct me or something, because I don't know it. I mean, here in, like, American schools, they don't tell you much about, like, a lot of other countries, especially, like, more Eastern countries, like European countries and stuff like that. Like, you learn a little bit about their history, but obviously, like, most history I remember from school, like, American history, because I literally had an entire class dedicated to American history my junior year, you know, so regardless and all that. But it seems like basically she got mixed up with the Rome people, but it's a thing of, like, no, like, it's for her, it's like, oh, all I did was, like, help hide certain people. She thought, like, getting mixed up in it was because it's like, no, it's like, it's a cause that I think it's like certain people kind of get radicalized and believed in. Once again, I'm coming from a place of ignorance, but it just seems like I basically was supposed to like blow someone up. I didn't. So maybe she was telling the truth about her cousin dying, but her cousin dying was probably like retaliation because either like, hey, your cousin was a part of it, or it was just their way of drawing you out. But for her, she said it herself, like, oh, she came to the U.S. for money like everyone else because she needs enough money to gather up stuff and disappear. Part of me wonders is the reason why Father Doyle's so cagey about it is because he's the same thing. He probably came to America to disappear, and Maeve being here will draw too much attention to him. So I think this might be, that's why I feel like there's definitely more to the story, because like I said, like, she's kind of very solemn later on when she's talking to Jenny, but when she was talking to Father Doyle early in the episode, she seemed, like I said, a little cheeky with like her responses and stuff. So that's why I'm thinking like it's probably a thing of like he doesn't want his past to come to the surface because he came here to kind of disappear, and now his past potentially can come back to haunt him. I think that's where they're potentially setting up. It seems like Jenny might be the one that goes like, okay, I'm going to dedicate some money, like help you out, whatever I can. Whether she'll actually go to Jackie about it, I don't know, because Jackie might be a little reserved. They're like, I'm not going to help. Jenny might just decide to give her the money herself. I just feel like that's going to blow up in her face. Once again, Doyle was like, Father Doyle was like, don't get involved, but Jenny can't help because Jenny's a good person at heart and she wants to do right. Hell, like, because Maeve even was suggesting early in the episode, just like, oh, like, don't worry about Jackie to get information about finding your dad. Just hire, like, a private detective to kind of, help out in that regard. So, but other than that, there's the whole situation with Kathy trying to make ends meet. Like, obviously, she tried to go back to get more drugs, but home dude was like, yo, my supplies run dry. He ends up pushing her. She cuts her hand, goes to the doctor. It's like, oh, you got like a $400 bill. It's like, for what? Some damn stitches? What are these stitches, like $50 each? If I'd known that, I would have just stitched it up my own fucking self. Like, obviously, it's like she's like in a bad place. Like, she doesn't, maybe killing Jimmy probably wasn't the best option, but to be fair, there's other elements going on, so like their supply is running dry because like Anton's not there, plus they were dealing with Junior at the same time, so business wasn't flowing like they wanted it to. So their situation is affecting Kathy's situation, which once again we still never found out how home dude knew where Kathy lived. I guess it's just a thing of like, oh, I guess we're just gonna leave it unanswered, just like, I got my sources or something like that. I guess that's where we're leaving at. Once again, because that dude is still alive, so he could easily circle back around to the Kathy thing, especially because Kathy ended up going to Sheik and Tara for help. I didn't bring this up during season 1 because I didn't review season 1, but Tara is Allison from Outcast. I was looking at the IMDb on like a Fire Stick at it, like when I was watching season 1. I was like, because I kept looking, I was like, why does she look so familiar? It's like, yeah, she's Allison from Outcast. On a short-lived show, only on 2 seasons from Cinemax. Also, another comic written by Robert Kirkman. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, she's a little reluctant to help Kathy because Kathy kind of goes to her because it's like, yo, Sheik, you got the drug connections. I need some money. I don't want a loan from you guys. Because I was about to say, because let's not also forget, like, they were getting paid off in season 1 to keep their mouth shut about a lot of stuff. But Tara's like, yeah, we can loan you out, but like Kathy's not the type to take a handout. I was like, no, I don't need your pity. I don't need your damn food. The fact of the matter is, like, my husband's dead. The fact is, all I've got are like those 3 kids at home. They're the only thing I have worth fighting for and living for. So I got to do whatever I can to make ends meet. But for Tara, it's like she feels bad for Kathy because Kathy wanted Sheik's drug connection. But it turns out like Tara and Sheik both like the fact is that he's sober, and they're worried that if he kind of gets too close, like he's going to start spiraling again. But ultimately, feeling bad for Kathy is like, all right, I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give you an introduction, which obviously Sheik was there kind of eyeing the drugs, and she's like, go. You feel like that's going to come full circle. It was a thing of like, yo, once we give you this dish and once I make this introduction, don't return the dish, because I think it's a thing of once you do, maybe Tara might find out the truth about kind of what we did, but also it's just kind of like we kind of have to cut ties with each other because this can never kind of come back to me for my sake as well as for your sake. So But at the end of the day, Kathy gets the drugs. I'm thinking that's going to there's multiple ways that can blow up in her face. I don't know if, like, Anton's people are going to come back and be like, yo, oh, you selling on our territory, like, you're turning into competition, so we're going to roll you type of thing. I don't know. I mean, they threatened it last episode, but she pulled a gun out and be like, yo, well, I guess she kind of got rolled to a certain extent. Like, he didn't steal from her, he just pushed her, but it's just, So, I don't know. There's also another part of me that's like, maybe her daughter's going to, like, her oldest, Kick, is going to end up finding the drugs or whatever, because it's like, oh, do you want this? It's like, no, I don't want it. Like, the others already ate. You can eat whatever you want of it. I'm not hungry right now. It's like, when can we go see Dad? It's like, I'm going to be honest with you, we're not going back. So Kick, still, obviously, like, not many people still know about Frankie, but, for her, she's still not telling Kick the truth. Eventually, she's going to have to, because if she don't, like, Kick's going to resent her. I'm like, because obviously she's still like, oh, because Sheik was asking about the whole Jimmy thing, but it's like, yeah, Jimmy had a lot of people that were pissed at him. He had enough enemies. It's like, right, probably still don't want to admit to anyone that, yes, Jimmy was a rat, but it's also like, oh, like, it'll probably put a little like, yikes, if people find out you're the one that put him down, So, I just feel like Kathy's whole with the drug thing, like, I just feel like it's just going to end tragically. It's going to go sideways. We'll ultimately have to wait and see what that ends up being the case, but I'm so curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.